It's now April, and Journey Together and Rotation are finally here. And I want to look at what I think are the best decks in our current metagame to play right now. If you're somebody who's been testing for the Atlanta Regional Championships or has been trying to play in these online tournaments and really get a handle on this format, I hope this video can help you out because I think these are 8 of the best decks you can play right now in our early Journey Together April metagames. Let's check out what I think are the best decks in the format. In my opinion, the best deck in the format easily has to go to Tera Box. I think this is the most well-rounded and versatile deck in our current metagame and really can beat everything, or at the very least, your deck has to have ways to combat this deck. This deck is really popping right now and is definitely getting the most hype. The idea of the deck is you have a toolbox of different attackers to choose from to help in different situations. We have the Teal Mask Ogre Pawn, which can hit for grass weakness, but also using its ability with Energy Switch to move the energy around. The main gimmick of the deck is mostly just the Wellspring Mask Ogre Pawn, which you can use early on in the game to really cripple your opponent's setup. With no more mana fee in the format, it's hard for the opponent to keep their bench safe. So what you can do if you're playing against a deck like Gholdengo or Dragapult or Charizard, you can get a turn 2 or even turn 1 sometimes Wellspring Ogre Pawn, taking the first 2 prizes of the game. This allows you to tempo really well with the help of the Pikachu EX, which is a very good attacker that not many decks have answers to, knocking out stuff like the Gholdengos and the Archaladons and Raging Bulls without really them having a good way to kill the Pikachu. If you happen to play against Dragapult, you do have the Lilius Clefairy in the deck, which can be a great way to want to KO that. You also have some sneaky plays with Terapagos EX's Crown Opal attack, and late game Blood Moon plays can really make it easy to finish off the last 2 prizes. This is easily the strongest deck in the format, and it's one of the harder decks to actually play against and at least tech for because it's such a versatile archetype. The best tech cards usually are just like Jamming Tower and Iono, but Tera Box, in my opinion, is easily the best deck in the format right now. Archaladon EX has had a lot of success recently, and I do think that this deck is going to pop off in this format, but what is the best way to play it? And in my opinion, I think one of the stronger ways, and maybe even the best way to play it, is the poison build here of Archaladon. This one has already been doing pretty good in the online tournaments, and this deck has a lot more power compared to the other Archaladon variants. There's other builds using stuff like the double, the Zacian, but I really do like the idea of just playing the poison package, because not only can you sometimes get random turn 1 donks with P.E.K.K.A. Run, but you also get to do more damage with your Archaladon. Archaladon caps at 220 damage. When you combine that, though, with Brute Bonnet, Peerless Jungle, and Binding Mochi, you can actually break through a lot of the numbers and knock out bigger threats, like stuff like the Pikachu EX and the Gholdengo EX in one hit. Being able to one-shot some of your hardest matchups is really, really good. And this deck is a lot more aggressive than the other Archaladon decks because it does have the ability to do some donk shenanigans with the P.E.K.K.A. Run. I think this is probably the strongest variant of Archaladon right now, and it has been the one that I've seen doing well in the online tourneys the most out of all the different builds of Archaladon. I will say this deck is a little less consistent than the other Archaladon decks because the bench is kind of clogged up. It doesn't really have as much of an engine compared to the other versions of Archaladon, but in my opinion, the strength and power level of this deck is a lot higher than the other variations of the Archaladon deck. So definitely keep your eye out on Poison Archaladon going forward. Dragapult definitely did take a bit of a hit with rotation, losing stuff like Lance and the V Pokemon and Force Heal Stone. However, the deck is still here, and a lot of people are still saying it's one of the top decks in the format, even though I do think the deck is a lot weaker than it was before, due to the fact that cards like Lance make the deck less consistent, and also the lack of V Pokemon and Force Heal also makes it harder to pull off different combos even easier. However, you still have the Dracloaks, the Dusknors, and the Budew in the deck, which can still give the deck a lot of plays thanks to the fact that this deck, if played by a very good player, can still go pretty far. It does have a lot of awkward matchups, though, in this format. Like, Tera Box can be kind of scary. Raging Bolt is popular. Gholdengo's still out there. Even Archaladon is still popular. So, our Dragapult still has a bit of an uphill battle, in my opinion, in this meta, but it's still very powerful. And like I said, when played by a really good player, this deck can still go very far. And it's still scary to play against. The ability for it to take all these extra prizes with Dusknor and Phantom Dive is still terrifying. And if you aren't able to really combat Dragapult, it can definitely run you over very easily. So definitely keep your eye out on Dragapult. I don't think it's going anywhere, but it definitely isn't as strong or maybe even as popular as it was in the past format. Another deck that's really popped off and made a name for itself recently is the Tank Terapagos deck, which in the past little bit with this meta being out, this deck has already started to win some tournaments. Now, this was originally piloted by Celio's Network, who got top 4 in a massive online tournament with this deck, and now the deck's getting a lot more popular. And like I said, it's already won an online tournament. And this is a very interesting take on Terapagos. I mean, the whole like Terapagos Dusknor Pidgeot deck doesn't really exist anymore, but now we have this build here using basic energies and Bouffalants and Monkey Dories making it a bit of a tank deck. Terapagos can do 240 damage with an area 0 and play any full bench. And with Buffalon's ability, the Terapagos will take minus 60 damage from attacks, making it very hard to one-shot. On top of the fact with the Monkey Dories, to heal off the Terapagos when you can't one-shot it, but to also put even more damage on the board. To be even more annoying, it's even got the Cornerstone Ogre Pawn in the deck with the Bravery Charms and the double Monkey Dory. You can make that Cornerstone Ogre Pawn a massive threat and can run through any deck that really struggles to do anything against this card. I think this deck actually has a lot of potential in our current meta, and I think we'll get a lot more popular going forward, and will probably solidify itself as a legit archetype in our Journey Together meta. So I definitely want to say you got to keep your eye out for this deck. Speaking of decks that are hard to deal with, let's talk about the Walls. The Wall deck, in my opinion, is still one of the strongest decks in our current meta, and anytime you or anyone has to build a deck, you gotta keep in mind the Walls. You can kind of see a lot of these archetypes in the meta playing these like random attackers you never heard of before, mainly because they can actually deal with these annoying wall Pokemon like the Farigiraf, the Cornerstone Ogre Pawn, and the Milotic EX. And this deck is going to be a very big threat in our meta, because really if this deck goes unchecked, it can be very easy to win with, because if the opponent has no way to deal with the said wall, it could be game over very quickly. That's why, like I said, you're seeing all these different archetypes playing these random tech cards that can somehow attack these threats. Like, some decks will play a random grass attacker that just so happens to have a way to deal with the Cornerstone, or some decks will start playing even more non-rule box basic Pokemon to deal with the Farigiraf, or they'll be playing some kind of lightning attackers to take out Milotic. This is definitely a deck that you have to keep in mind when building a deck going forward. And even if this deck isn't going to like win any like big tournaments or anything, it's still a deck that'll be popular. People will still play it because it's easy to cheese wins with a deck like this. And again, if some decks are being built to not respect this deck and you hit it, well, literally you could just lose on the spot. It's that powerful. So you got to respect the Walls, and I definitely had to put it here in the top decks in our current meta. As somebody who's a massive fan of Gholdengo EX, I'm happy to report the deck is still here and pretty good in our current metagame. The deck did lose some pretty big hits with rotation, like the Radiant Greninja and the Pokestop, which are really good consistency cards for Gholdengo. The deck is a lot less fast and aggressive and powerful as it used to be with those two cards gone, but the deck has adapted, and the main way that it's adapted, and the most popular way, the one that's been doing the best in online tournaments, has been playing Gholdengo EX with the Dunsparce. So Dunsparce has the ability Runaway Draw, which lets you draw 3 cards, then you gotta shuffle the Dunsparce back into the deck. Now, you do have to find a way to then get the Dunsparces back out and like refine the Dunsparce, but drawing 3 cards is pretty good. It gives you on-board draw, especially if you can just sit there with a Dunsparce and play if you get Iono'd. One of the benefits of playing the Dunsparce, though, and the best part of it, is you get the Dunsparce EX, which is so good. It's like a Scizor and a Shred attacker all in one. Its first attack does 60 damage for each of your opponent's EXs in play, which is nice. And then you have another attack that can hit through the wall Pokemon. It does 150 damage for 3 colorless energy and goes through any effects on your opponent's active Pokemon. So you can shred through both Mimikyu, and of course you can hit Cornerstone Mask Ogre Pawn, which is one of Gholdengo's biggest ops right now. And I really like the addition of the Dunsparce. The deck still can play stuff like the Monkey Dory, the Pheasantipity, even the Baby Gholdengo can still see some play. This is one of the highest placing builds right now of the deck in the online tourney scenes. And I do like the idea of the Baby Dengo, though I have been experimenting recently with playing a Scizor in the deck. I think Scizor is still a really nice card to have in Gholdengo as another backup attacker, a one-prize attacker. So I've been liking the Scizor in my Gholdengo Dunsparce deck, but I could definitely see stuff like Baby Dengo and Monkey Dory being good. Gholdengo has a great matchup against Archaladon and Raging Bolt and Dragapult, which makes it good. By far, though, the worst matchup this deck has to face at the moment is, of course, the Tera Box deck. And since that, in my opinion, is the best deck to beat right now, it's not ideal for Gholdengo having a bad matchup versus one of the best decks, but Gholdengo is still a very powerful deck, and definitely one you got to keep your eye out for right now. Raging Bolt EX might be in one of the best spots it's ever been in a long time, and that's because it really can adapt to the meta really nicely and doesn't really lose too much with rotation. Also, it can run a lot of decks over, which is what makes it so powerful, and it can deal with these wall decks really nicely. Now, Raging Bolt, much like Gholdengo, actually did lose some pretty good cards with rotation, like the Pokestop and the Radiant Greninja, which kind of sucks for the deck. But to make up for the lack of that, it is playing the Noctowls in the deck to make the deck a lot more consistent. Since you already play the Teal Mask Ogre Pawns, why not play the Noctowls Jewel Seeker ability to help find your Sawdas and even Crispin, which Raging Bolt is now also playing. One of the cool things about the Raging Bolt deck is how it can deal with these wall decks. Farigiraf is a pretty big deal for Raging Bolt, but you do have so many cool options for different one-prize attackers, like the one-prize Raging Bolt. You can see this list is playing. There's Koraidon you can play. There's also the Slitherwing, which I quite like as a way to knock out Pikachu EX and Blood Moon or Sluna in one hit. Raging Bolt is a very powerful archetype, and I expect this deck to be really popular in our current meta. People love their Raging Bolt, man, and I think this deck will be extremely popular at the Atlanta Regional Championship, so definitely you got to keep your eye out for Raging Bolt, and honestly, you probably got to respect the deck going forward. It is a big basic beat stick deck, but it probably is one of, if not the strongest of the big basic beat stick decks right now. You definitely have to keep your eye out on this deck, because Raging Bolt is in a pretty good spot right now. The last deck I wanted to mention within today's video was actually going to be Feraligatr, which I think is the best one-price deck you can play right now in our current meta. This deck really popped off and got a lot of attention thanks to its big win at the Champions League in Japan, but I really do think that Feraligatr is probably going to be the best one-price deck in this metagame. It's a very sneaky archetype with all these really cool options and plays the deck has access to, thanks to Croconaut's hit and run attack with the Mimikyu, thanks to the Totodile being able to trap stuff, and even the Feraligatr doing big damage with Giant Wave. The Monkey Dories make it really interesting to move all the damage around with Feraligatr's ability. The deck can also play the Milotic EX deck if you want to be even more annoying and probably fix your matchup against Dragapult, which can be a little bit of a tricky one, obviously. But yeah, Feraligatr is a really cool archetype, and I want to see this deck succeed in this metagame. I think it did win an online tournament, which is pretty good for the deck. And yeah, like I said, if you want to play a one-price deck right now and are looking to play something to Atlanta that's one-price focused, definitely consider looking into Feraligatr, because I think this is probably the best one-price deck in our metagame, and in my opinion, is the one with the most options. But who knows? We'll have to see what other cool decks pop out into the woodwork. It's still kind of early, and while I could have included decks like Enzork or Hobzation in this video, we haven't really seen those decks have enough success yet. Maybe post-Atlanta, those decks maybe could make this type of video, so hopefully, fingers crossed that it's happening, because I know somebody's probably going to comment, where's Enzork, where's Hobzation at? Well, we haven't seen them pop off well enough yet, or have like a good 60 yet, for those decks to be decided on. Hey, those decks are broken right now. But yeah, these, in my opinion, are 8 of the best decks in our current early metagame for Journey Together. If y'all enjoyed today's video, make sure to leave a like on the video. I'd greatly appreciate it. If you're new to the channel, once again, subscribe down below. We're on the road to 23,000 subscribers now, and I'll catch y'all on another video here very soon. Bye-bye.